Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started here tonight. I wanted to thank everyone for coming. Got a pretty good turnout tonight. And my name is Jeremy Yost, and I'm going to be introducing Mark Decker. He's with house staff, and he's going to be doing a PowerPoint presentation for us this evening. So Mark, go ahead and come on up, please.
I like that. Thank you. I like to keep that over. I don't make that much money though. So, welcome everybody. My name is Mark. I do these presentations on behalf of our state reps all over the state. Property taxes is the number one issue that our offices get calls and emails and letters about. So, I'm happy you're here. I'll try to go through this fairly quickly. I don't mean to insult anybody's intelligence, but I might say some things that you're like, well, that's obvious. I knew that. That's good, but I want to make sure everybody's on the same playing field when we talk about it. And then if you have questions, just so you know, we're doing a live stream, so your questions are important. If you have a question, I'd ask that you hold it to the end. If you just can't hold it until the end, I will take questions, but I prefer you wait till I get through the whole slideshow, and then the answer may be in the slides, okay? So again, property taxes, understanding the assessment process is the first issue. If you'll, I just want to say thank you real quick to Hope Weber, who I talked with on the phone, and she's been very helpful in collaborating with us, make sure that we have all the good information for you. Okay. So the Illinois Department of Revenue, the property tax is the largest single tax in Illinois, and is a major source of revenue for local government taxing districts. Illinois does not have a state property tax. So last year, the state had a property tax was 1932. Owners of real property like a house, land, commercial, industrial pay property taxes directly. People who do not own real property most likely pay their property tax in their rent. I'm currently a renter. I know that the person who owns my triplex has added the property tax cost into my rent, and that's how it works. Anyone who attends public school, drives on roads or streets, uses a local library, has a fire protection services, county services, etc. Your property taxes go to those. Illinois has nearly 7,000 taxing districts. It's the largest number of taxing districts in the country. So I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know. Property tax, ancient history is what I call this. 1818 to 1932, state levied a centralized property tax on personal property and real estate. In 33, property taxes were levied, collected, and spent at the local level starting in 33. In 39, the Revenue Act of 1939 was the foundation of what our current property tax system code is. In 1970, there was a new Illinois Constitutional Convention, and they put in that Constitution to phase out by 1979 any tax on personal property. Okay. Recent history: 1972, General Assembly enacts the senior homestead exemption. 78, a general residential homestead. 91, the property tax extension limitation law, PTEL is probably what you've heard it called. 94, senior assessment freeze was enacted. And in 2007, 3 new homestead exemptions were enacted. Now, since 07, I didn't put it on here, but there's the returning veterans exemption. So if you are in a theater of war, like Iraq or Afghanistan, and you come home, when they first passed the bill about maybe 10 years ago now, maybe it was 07, I can't remember. It was a 1-year, $5,000 exemption for returning veterans from a theater of war. It was such a popular program that the legislature 2 years later extended it to a 2-year exemption. So it was a way for us to say thank you to the soldiers workers who went out and put their lives on the line, and then they need to come back and reestablish themselves in their communities, buy a home, establish a family, whatever they want, So that's what that was intended to do. So what determines my property tax amount? And if you don't leave here with anything else today, this evening, this brochure is all you need. Take this with you, because this is the basics of all this is in here. So you have an assessed valuation on your property. The Illinois Constitution mandates that every piece of property in Illinois to be assessed at 1/3 of market value. Every piece of property. Now, if you have farmland, there's a little bit different on farmland because of the quality of soil and the kinds of the productivity of the particular land. Some soil is a higher grade than others, some is in flood plains, and so there's a whole program of establishing those 3 levels of quality for farmland. But basically, every piece of property in Illinois is supposed to be assessed at 1/3 of market value. Now, market value is determined by, if my cousins here sell me a house at $20,000, that's not an arm's length transaction. That's not something that they put on the market. Or if my grandmother leaves me a house, she says, oh, you can have it for $40,000, even though it's valued at $100,000. That's great, but that's not considered an arm's length transaction. So the market value is determined by an arm's length transaction, which means you put the property up for sale to the general public. There were bids, there were back and forth, whatever, and then they decided that $75,000, I bought this property with this home. That's fair market value. So you want an assessed value, you subtract any of the exemptions that you're entitled to. We'll talk about this again, but exemptions are your homestead exemption. If you live in your home on January 1st, you're entitled to the homestead exemption. If you are 65 years or older, you're entitled to apply for that senior exemption. Now, my mom is older than my dad, and my dad was so excited he married an older woman because when my mom turned 65 several years ago, they started getting the homestead exemption for seniors, the senior exemption. And my dad was still this young, guy, but he got the senior exemption. So you subtract any of the exemptions that you're entitled to. You multiply that by the tax rate, which is determined by all the different taxing bodies who come up with budgets, libraries, schools, mosquito abatement. I don't know all the specifics for this particular area, but generally there's about 13 or so taxing bodies within an area. But that tax rate is applied, and then that's your bottom line tax bill. So you've got an assessment, you have your exemptions that you minus off of that assessment, you multiply by the tax rate, and that's your bottom line tax bill. Okay. The property tax, I'm not going to read every word of this, but the property tax cycle, generally the property tax cycle is a 2-year cycle. You're always paying the tax bill from the year before. So when the market's going up or market's going down, and you're like, well, my house isn't worth $100,000 anymore. My house is only worth $72,000 because the market's gone down. That may be true, but again, your assessing officers are obligated by the rules to look at a 3-year average or a median. And so you may be on the upswing or you may be on the downswing, and that's why it's not 1-for-1 today. You're paying last year's taxes this year. So there's an assessment, there's a review of the assessment decisions. Every county board has a 3-member board review. So there's the county, then there's a state equalization. You've all heard of the equalization. Oh, the equalization factor. What is it going to be this year? The equalization factor is put on by the State Department of Revenue. So remember, one of the first things I said was the Illinois Constitution mandates that every piece of property be assessed at 1/3 of its market value. So in a given area, let's say that county, let's say the median is 60,000, but it should be at 65,000. Maybe that's what the market's, because the Department of Revenue does these studies also. If they take a look at all the market sales, the arm's length sales that are ones they review, if they think that from their studies that the median assessment should be at 70,000 and the average or median is at 65, they will add a multiplier of 1.006 or whatever the number is to your assessment to equalize that back up to where it should be according to the Constitution, 1/3 of the market value. So you'll hear about that. There are cases where the multiplier is not 1 point something, but it's 0.992, because the assessments are just a little bit higher than what the median ought to be. And so the state equalizer, the factor is applied. And so it brings it down just slightly. So and it's not an exact, so if your neighbors are like, $27 above yours, and your houses are exactly the same, by the same builder, and you have the same amount of land, that doesn't mean that you're over-assessed or they're under-assessed. They work with median, so it's right here. It's not an exact science. Levies, taxing districts put a levy. If the schools decide they need to buy more books to teach kids, or computers these days, or a fire protection district needs to buy a new fire truck to modernize, they will come up with a budget to be able to pay for those, and that budget is a levy. That levy is then what they use to decide what the tax rate is. Extensions, county clerk applies the state equalizer factor. Then the collection of your taxes, as you all know, is the treasurer of the county. Sends out the tax bills and collects them, and then distributes those dollars to schools, libraries, fire protection districts. Okay? All right. Non-farmland property assessment administration cycle, you can see again, I just sort of went through that with the clerk and the chief county assessment officer is your assessor. Township assessors are the ones that are local to your township. Inside the brochure, there should be a listing of your local townships. Is anybody here from Crawford County, or is anybody outside of Crawford County? Okay. So what I'm telling you here today applies to every county. Every county is a little bit different. Everybody has their own little idiosyncrasies, and maybe they don't do it by May 1st, they do it by May 15th. The cycle that we talk about is determined by the board review and how fast they get done, how many appeals they've had before they can pass the books on to the next level. And so it gets backed up sometimes. I spent 7 years in Cook County, a totally different animal, okay? Totally different animal. And they were behind, almost 10 months behind cycle. They were never on time because everybody took their sweet time, working the numbers or whatever. So outside of Cook County, most of our counties are pretty good. The other 101 pretty good about staying on cycle. Okay. There's a board review. I mentioned every county. There's 102 counties, and every county has a board review. It's a 3-member board. Now, in the assessing process, you as taxpayers need to know that you have rights. You have the right to get the exemptions that you're entitled to. You have the right to appeal if you feel like your assessment is out of whack. So the first level of appeal in most counties is it's not an official legalistic sort of process. It's you talk to your local township assessor or you talk to the county assessor and say, hey, I don't think I got my homeowner's exemption on this, or it doesn't look like I don't see it on my paperwork, or it looks like you're assessing me for 2,000 square feet of living space, but I only have 1,500. I'm paying for 500 square feet of living space that doesn't exist. Oh, you have a basement. Yes, but under the law, the low grade is not it's not assessed. You assess above grade unless you're in a category like split level home where it's designed and then it's a different kind of a. But if it's a basement, I love basements. I'm a big guy and I like cool. The basement is always cool. I got my big TV, my big St. Bernard, and the rest of the family just, you know, do their thing and I'm okay in the basement. But that area is, even though I live there, is not considered part of living square footage. So you want to make sure that your square footage on your property document is accurate. Because if you are off and somebody typed in the wrong thing 10 years ago, well, you're paying for space that's not technically living space. So, okay, let's go. Some of this stuff. Budget, levy, tax extension, collection cycle. You all know that how that works. We just talked about that. We don't need to go there. Yeah, the next one. Again, the farmland assessment, I mentioned it earlier. There's a whole technical way that they do that. Basically, there's 3 different qualities of land. Okay, so grounds for a successful assessment appeal. Let's say, you know, my taxes are high, okay, my taxes are too high is not a reason for appealing. It's not the basis of making a successful appeal. Because we all say that my taxes are high. Overvaluation, unequal treatment or equity, or contention of law. Those are the 3 areas that you may make an appeal on. Okay, so overvaluation assessment appeal. The assessment applies a fair cash value above the current market value. I recently purchased my home for $300,000, yet the assessment translates to a fair cash value of $500,000. So what you're using is a sales approach. Sales price, terms of subject property, comparable sales, appraisal, etc. So you can use an appraisal, you can use the other homes that are in your area that are like yours, similar to yours, as a comparable or comparable. Okay, the next one would be what we call equity or unequal treatment. Assessed value is not reasonable in the context of the value placed upon other similar properties. There are 10 nearly identical homes as mine. With my subdivision, my house is assessed at $50,000 more than all of the others. So your appropriate evidence would be going around and finding other houses like yours, taking a look at. The easiest way to do it is if you have a 1,000 square foot home, you find another roughly 1,000 square foot home, you divide that into the assessed valuation, you get a per foot. So my house is basically assessed at $22.50 a square foot. My neighbors are assessed at $20 a square foot, $19 a square foot, $18.75 a square foot, $14 a square foot. So here I've got examples of all of these houses assessed per square footage lower than mine. That would be the kind of evidence that you would want to look for. Yes?
So you just go to the office and get somebody's, you know, who owns the home, you want to, that's public record to look all that up.
You can.
Your taxes, your taxes.
Yeah, but there's a new the website has just been updated for the county, and I believe I haven't worked it through today, but I believe you can actually do it online. But let me, but yeah, you can get it from the office, and it's all public information. You're not squealing on your neighbors. This is not about that. It's about fairness. Because if you, I mean, look, I hate taxes. I'm a conservative. I hate taxes. That's where I start off from. I start off right here. But the reality is I like going to my library. I like it that my kids have a good school with good teachers that are teaching them math and science. So I know that I need to pay my fair share. But this is about paying your fair share and not overpaying, not paying more than your fair share. That's really the message here. And then let's go to the next one. Contention of law. I own a 50-acre farm and was denied the preferential agricultural assessment. So there's something that's the third category of an appeal that you can make. The law wasn't followed when it was applied to my particular property. Okay. Exemptions. Now, exemptions reduce the taxable assessed value for recipients of the exemptions. They shift the tax liability between taxpayers, and they typically do not reduce the total amount of tax collected. The fire district needs to do a new fire truck. It's going to cost them $500,000. Everybody in this room is in the fire district, and each one of your properties you need to pay your portion. One house might have 40 acres and 8,000 square foot of living space. Another house might have 1 acre and 1,500 square feet. And so the assessment should reflect the value proportionally. So your tax bill for the fire district, your line item is going to be different than the next person's line item. And it's not so easy on the surface to say, well, wow, I got the same house as she does or he does. Well, maybe they get an exemption because they are returning debt. And that year they have a $5,000 exemption. Maybe they have a senior exemption or a senior freeze. Maybe they have a disabled resident. So there's all those different variables that you have to dig a little deeper to see, well, okay, he just, put his life on the line in Afghanistan for 6 years. He's getting this fine. Okay, so that's why his bottom line tax bill is a little bit less than mine, because the tax rate is applied to a tax, an assessment amount that's lower than my starting. And so then that makes sense, and you're like, okay, that's fine. Or maybe you find the opposite. Yours is lower than. So what happens if you do this research and you're like, my land, all my neighbors, they're assessed up here, I'm way down here. What do? Nothing. Don't do anything. It's not your obligation to, jack your own taxes up. So you walk away and you say, hey, okay, I'm getting the better of the deal right now. Because it may be 10 years from now that your property doesn't get that deal. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So CrawfordCountyCentral.com, this is the new website look. If any of you have ever been to it before, it's now has a new look. Okay, next one. You'll click on it, and it'll say, welcome to our new website. That's what it's going to look like. There's an assessor button down here on the left, and you click on that. Let's go to the next one. That's the rest of that page. I had to split up these pages when I put them on here. So this is the kind of information you'll see. It's got their address, phone numbers, emails, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so the next one. So Hope Weber, I mentioned her earlier. This is her address and location, her phone number, her email. If you click down on the website, the GIS, so go to the next one, it'll pull up a map. And so here's a map of Crawford County. Okay, next. Exemptions, we've talked about these, the general homestead. On each of these, the returning veterans, homestead for persons with disabilities, senior citizen assessment freeze. Now the freeze is, if you qualify for the senior exemption, because either you or your wife or the husband, either one of you is 65 or older, but now you make less than 55,000 total household income, you might qualify for the senior freeze, where it will freeze your exemption, where your assessment where it's at. And as long as you reapply every year and your income stays below that 55,000, that freeze holds on that property. It stays there. Even when the market's gone skyrocketing and everybody's moving to Central Illinois and they love small town and it's a great place to raise their kids, the market's going gangbusters. If you are on the freeze and you continue to make lower than the 55,000, then your assessment will hold at that level. Now, if you have a son or a daughter or even a grandchild that moves in with you for the summer or for the year, because let's say, I'll take a fairly close to home-ish example. A child gets a divorce. They get separated from their wife. They move back home while they're trying to figure out, where am I going? Where can I live? What am I going to do? I need to, I got to stay close to my kids, but I can't live in the same house. It's not going to work. So I move in with my parents. if I could work at McDonald's or someplace just to make ends meet, pay for the gas, and I made $30,000 that year, now the total household income is not 55, it's 85. That freeze comes off that property. Now I get my act together, I find a new job, I'm going to move to St. Louis, there's a great job there, I'm close enough to my kids, I can go and see them on the weekends, I have visitation rights. I'm out, now my parents' total household income is what? 47.8, below the 55,000. Now they can put the freeze back on. Now the freeze is on that higher amount because it went off that year that I was there, but it's now frozen again. So as long as that income, and so you reapply for it every year, because some of you may have Caterpillar stock or Disney stock or AT&T, and some years your dividends are higher and some are lower, and they count all of your income. As long as you're under that 55,000, you qualify for that freeze, right? Next one. There's more disabled veterans. And the next one. Okay, so on each of those, there's a click. You can click on each of those exemptions, and it'll bring up a page, an application for that particular exemption. And it looks like this. It's actually a longer, regular sheet of paper. I just did a camera shot of the top half of it so you can see that it'll say application for. In this case, it's a senior citizen and homestead exemption. And you'll fill it out. You can fill it out actually online if you have access to the internet. If you don't, your library probably does, or kids or grandkids probably get it on their phone. Could probably do it for you. So, okay, next one. Crawford County Board Review Rules. Again, basically the rules for the Board of Review. A Board of Review was set up because it's about fairness. This is really about fairness. Let's say every piece of property should be assessed at 1/3 of its market value, and in your particular neighborhood, the assessed valuation because of market value ought to be at $75,000. But let's say all of the houses are at 65 or 67, somewhere in there, maybe even 70. You can make an appeal to the Board of Review based on fairness, again, the equity, saying all of my neighbors are assessed at 67. Well, and the median is about 67. I'm at 75. I deserve to be lower. And that's a good case, in my opinion. As long as you show this house at this address, that house at that address, this house. As long as you show that, then it's about fairness. And you want me to put at 67 where your neighbors are. So that's what the Board of Review is about. They also take cases where, let's say a corporation comes in and they are on exempted land or a TIF district or something like that. They were attracted to your community because they got a deal of 10 years or 5 years, whatever it is, not to pay taxes, but the overall impact to your community is it created 400 new jobs. And all those people are hopefully going to buy houses and pay property taxes on those homes and add to the community. But then after that 5 or 6 or 80 or whatever, then that corporation that land will come onto the tax rolls again. Other properties that aren't taxed, churches, nonprofit organizations like YMCAs, or I think there are some other kinds of, so those kinds of organizations that are tax exempt will not be paying property taxes. And sometimes somebody will approach a Board of Review and say, well, that property over there that's not a YMCA. I've been a YMCA for 12 years. It's a small business. That guy makes widgets, and with the widgets, they can, make chocolate. I don't know. And so it's a company. It needs to be on the tax rolls, and those things, that happens. A lot of times, it's a school district will go and challenge, but taxing districts, all kinds of taxing districts will go and challenge the tax exempt status of a property, because they need every property they can get on the tax roll so they can get enough money to pay teachers good salaries, take care of buying the books and computers, buying the football uniforms or whatever. And so that's the sort of philosophy. Okay, next one. That's just more of the board review. You can read those. Okay. I put the address up there again. It's 100 North Douglas. And here's the, and this is just another way of looking at the process of Crawford County's assessment process. But the basic concept is in your brochure. There's a panel in here that shows the taxing districts, the budget, the tax levy cycle, and then the assessment tax bill process. That process is the same. The dates might, I think I said earlier, they might tweak the dates a little bit based on how long one particular part of the county has the books. Okay, next one. That's just more of the process. And there are public notices now on the Crawford County website. They'll post notices, taxpayer notices, and you can see what's going on. Okay, next one. You can click on these PDFs. They'll show, I think I have one. Let's go to the next one. Yeah. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay. If you click on those, it'll give a list of all of the sales in that township. Go back one. Okay. So Licking Township, there'll be a list of all of the property. It'll have the date, the amount of the sale, who owns it. And so you can sort of see what's going on in that particular township. So the next one, okay. The assessor sales report, there's also online. You can see what's been sold. You probably hear of notices in the paper that 22 properties are going up for sale because they're delinquent on their taxes. You never wish that on anybody. You don't want anybody to lose their home or their farm or anything. But those things happen. So by law, they have to put them up because they've got to get them back onto the tax rolls so that somebody is paying property taxes on that, so that it helps the schools and the libraries and the fire protection districts, etc. Okay. Important resources. Now, your most important resources are inside this little brochure, and it says Crawford County contacts. First one is Hope Weber, her address and phone number and website, email. And then it has the township assessors for the different townships, the board of review. But the others, if you have other kinds of questions, the state legislature through your state rep, the Department of Revenue, I mentioned that a couple of times. They're important because they do sales studies, and they're the ones that put that multiplier on to equalize assessments. PTAB, Property Tax Appeal Board. So there's 3 levels of appeal. You appeal to your local assessor. The second level is the board of review. That's a 3-member board. If you make your case, it doesn't have to be unanimous. It's a majority vote. There's 3 members. If 2 say you made your case, you get a reduction. So let's say you've gone to the assessor and she works with you and it's lower than you get. You're like, no, I still think I'm overassessed. You go to the board of review. They say, no, you got a reduction. We think where you need to be. And you're like, no, I just really, I think that I'm overassessed. You have a 3rd level. You can go to a PTAB, Property Tax Appeal Board. It's free to homeowners. All of these appeals are free, except if you are a corporation. If you're a corporation, you do need to hire an attorney to make your case. But if you're a regular homeowner and you can make your own case, you can fill out the paperwork, send it in. This goes to Springfield. In the Stratton building, if you've ever been to Springfield, up on the 4th floor, there's an office called Property Tax Appeal Board. My cubicle is an office right next door to them, so I see them all the time. They used to be 7 or 8 years behind on cases. I mean, it was just outrageous. What happened back in the Blagojevich years, not trying to beat up on anybody in particular, but this is what happened. There were two PTAB offices, one in Springfield and one in Des Plaines, Illinois, next to O'Hare Airport. So the Des Plaines office, which is where I used to live for a while when I worked with other state reps, they were supposed to be for all of the suburban appeals and all those applications and all those cases. Well, under the Blagojevich years, he didn't shut the office down, but he zeroed out the line item paid for the light bill and the water bill, and so they couldn't open the doors. So all of those cases from the suburban area went there. The only other place they could go, which was Springfield. So for years, I would walk to my office in the Stratton building, and there would be hundreds of boxes of cases just sitting there. They didn't have enough room to store them in a secure place, so they just sat there. And because I knew that's what most people walk by, and they just thought, oh, those people are moving boxes. That's what they thought for 7 years. And I got, nervous walking by because I would think, well, what, senior citizen has made an appeal, and are they ever going to get a decision in their favor before they die? I mean, really, you've got people who are making these appeals, and you've got 7 to 8 years behind. Now I think they're only 4 years behind. So they've gotten a little better, but it takes people. You want a fair hearing. You want, if you make an appeal, you want somebody to look at your case, look at your evidence, and rule, hopefully in your favor. So anyways, that's the third level. Local assessor, board of review, PTAC, property tax appeal board. So there's 3 levels: local, township, county, state. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you. I didn't mean to go long. I apologize, but I wanted to make sure that we're all on the same playing field. I had one question, but are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
What's your own plan to go out and get an assessed value to your property?
Well, if you hire an appraiser, that's arm's. I mean, that's legitimate. An appraiser is certified to understand floodplains, and did you use bricks and mortar, or did you use wood? Are you you have fireplaces? How many bathrooms do you have? How many bedrooms do you have? Do you have an attached garage? So all that stuff an appraiser will know, and that's a legitimate piece of evidence to say my house is valued at this.
I was talking about the commercial piece of property I have out west in town.
Yeah,
I had to
yeah.
go to the court to find out why, with a lawyer, like
Yeah.
you said. And when it all cut down, the appraised, they used for some champagne Illinois. That's not arm's length.
Yeah, so, okay.
It is arm's length.
Arm's length means that there wasn't we don't have a special relationship. You're not my cousin, you're not my uncle, you didn't sell it to me for under, That's what arm's length. Arm's length isn't about distance, it's not about miles, it's about relationships. So arm's length transaction is, what's your name?
Alex.
Alex, I don't know you from an ad. So, and he's not in here. So Alex, if I buy a house from Alex, he didn't give me a cut rate deal because I'm handsome, or I'm his cousin. He just, he got the best deal he could, and I negotiated with him for a $50,000 house. That's arm's length. Distance, there are, generally, you want to be in the same neighborhood, you want to be in the same township, the same county. There are exceptions to every rule. If the kind of industrial or commercial property you have, if the closest one is in another county, I'm not saying that they could never do that. It's just, I don't hear that very often. But it might be a unique kind of let's say it's an oil kind of business, and it has certain kinds of machines. And the next oil kind of business that's closest to you is in Champaign. That would make sense to me. It's not normal in terms of every day where their house is 1,200 square feet and their house is 1,400 square feet, and they're in the same neighborhood, they're roughly the same, and I can see that brick. That makes more sense, but industrial and commercial can be a little more challenging to find a comparable.
It wasn't that challenging.
Okay.
And what I don't understand, I went to every official in this county and the city, and they're setting them, they know I did. They could not give me an answer to just pay it. You have to pay it. Then I go get a lawyer, and it cost me $6,000 to save $7,000. I mean, I'm already paid the 7 and the 6, I was already paid it and went on, but that's not the way life is.
Well, part of the reason we do these kinds of programs is to remind taxpayers that you have rights. You do have rights. We want people to pay their fair share. but if you felt like you were overpaying, then you have the right.
The person that handed it out, I went and talked to, she should have explained it, or had ability to explain it, and instead of just saying, that's the way it is.
Yeah, I agree. I think I don't have all the answers. I'm the first person that somebody's gonna ask. If you ask me a question, I can't answer. I'll say I don't know.
Then people don't work. Look at them, they work,
That's right.
they pay the tax dollars, so they ought to be a lot more courteous and understanding, you know, why did my taxes go from $3,500 to $22,000? I was upset.
I can see that. I'm the first person, I'm the first person saying to you, I work for all of you. You all pay my salary. I work for the state, I work for the caucus, and I work for you. And my job is to make sure that you get the right answer, not the answer that you want to hear, but my job is to make sure you get an accurate answer to your question. And I'm obligated to do that. I have a moral obligation because I work for all of you. So I have that attitude. I think
I have to say, there was people who tried to do it out for me,
okay.
but they didn't have.
Okay.
I had to go get them.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry that you had to do that, but that's all I can say about your case. I don't know. Yes, sir.
Something about fair market value.
Yes.
How can a house that sells on the market sell for a certain price, but the assessed value, the 1/3 assessed value does not add up to the price it's sold for? There's several residents in this, places in this town that have sold for 100 and some thousand over what their assessed value is in the next taxes. How is that to get an individual can go and build a new house or take an old house and remodel it, and they have no problem with raising the taxes to the highest kilt that they can for those? And secondly, how can farm ground sell for $9,000, $10,000 an acre, and you go look at 100 acres that sold for say $440,000? You look at the assessed value, it's $9,779. Where is the justification in that? And thirdly, how do you get a whole county reassessed by an objective bipartisan group like they did in Indiana? If you go to Indiana right now and look at their taxes, you can get $600,000 to $700,000 taxes for houses for $2,500. Farm ground for 100 acres is $2,900 taxes. How do we get to a point where the residents are treated all equally?
The Department of Revenue does an analysis every year. And the numbers, I believe, are all posted now. It's part of the efforts of our legislators have said about, I can't think of the word. So that I can't even think of the word, I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, so that you understand what your government's doing. You have a right to see transparency. We have a big effort the last several years of moving for transparency, putting things online. How much does the state owe? Who they owe? What? And so the Department of Revenue, those numbers are available to you. They look at the numbers. If you're underassessed, assessed, or overassessed, that's what the multipliers intended to do, is equalize that. So
I agree with that. I went to the board all three places that you
okay.
went, and I was basically rejected. I went through the website for a whole day, and I had 5 or 6 comps that showed the differences, and I was rejected, other than the fact of some property that they decided to lower it on. But to me, what we have here is we've got certain standards for some and other standards for others. There's houses right now selling for $200,000 and $300,000 that their assessed value is $200,000. And after they sell, they do not go up; they stay there. You are told to go get an appraisal to get yours lower to find fair market value, but these houses that are selling at this price are not being taxed at that price. Why is that? It's about 80 to 75 to 80% of the sell value.
So I don't have an answer for you. I'd have to do some research. I mean, the system is supposed to allow for you to make an appeal, submitting evidence saying, I'm overassessed, I bought my house for $200,000. The Illinois Constitution says every piece of property is to be assessed at 1/3 of fair market value. That's, you take the Constitution in, that's your evidence.
And I heard exactly what Terry heard.
Yeah.
That's the way it is, just that.
Yeah, and well, you don't know me very well, but you know that is not what I would say.
No, I like what you said at the beginning. You talked about appraisals, fair market value.
Right, that's right.
1/3 of value.
That's right.
I can get on that computer right now and I can show you three instances where they're $100,000 under assessed if you're going by what they sold for.
Yeah.
Did you take it all the way to the property tax appeal?
I was told my last option was to go to send it to the state. When I walked out, they said, good luck, it'll be 3 or 4 years before you hear.
Doesn't matter, you still, I'm in the same, I got several pieces of property, I did the same thing in Coles County, I disagreed with their assessment. And I went to the review board, they rejected it, so we weren't going to change it, I gave my costs. Based on, I didn't hire an outside, appraiser, to get an appraisal of that. I used my own costs, because I figured I knew how to do it myself.
That's what I did.
And I probably made that mistake. I probably should have, but I went ahead and I filed the property tax appeal board. Now, it's been probably 8 months. I'm gonna be waiting. I may be paying this next year's property tax, but eventually I'm gonna get in front of them with facts and figures. And then I present it to them. And, if they reject it, they're gonna reject it. So that's the appeal that you got.
I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you, but I promise you I can give you an honest answer, because that's what you deserve.
What percentage of the property tax appeal boards, are ruled in the favor of the person that brings?
It used to be about 50-50. I haven't looked at those numbers recently, but it used to be about 50-50.
Could you get that to me so I can, publish that, let people know?
Yeah.
That's 50-50, that's pretty good.
Yeah, and the thing with assessment, remember you're always paying a year behind. Making an appeal at the local level or the board of review level. Remember there's that one slide that was blue with white lettering and it said exemptions shift, appeals shift. Because if the school wants $1 million or the library needs $500,000, they're going to get their money. This appealing stuff just shifts the balance of who pays how much, and you want to be paying your fair share, not more than your fair share. But when you get to the property tax appeal board level, the PTAB level, when a decision is made on behalf of the taxpayer who was over assessed and overpaid, they have to go back to all of those taxing bodies in your area that, let's say, with this company, you overpaid $1 million. They have to divide that $1 million that he overpaid between all of those little taxing districts from that year. And there's a special account that they have to keep on hand for refunds because you overpaid and it's your money. And even though you like the schools and the libraries and the fire protection districts, you overpaid. It wasn't a fair share. And so PTAB has a big impact on taxing bodies. And so nobody wants you to go to PTAB because that means they have to take money back away from people that they gave it to. But they gave them too much to begin with. Now they may not like me saying that, but that's what the numbers speak for themselves. If you go to PTAB and you win PTAB, that means that you overpaid. You paid more than your fair share as a taxpayer. And that's not what we want. We want you to be able to pay and support the roads and the bridges and the schools and the libraries and the fire trucks. We all need that. We all want that. But I don't want to pay, $1 million in taxes when all I should be paying is $100,000 or, my parents, they pay the house that we bought for them for retirement. They were paying $3,500 a year. It went to $6,500, like $3,000. My mom's having a heart attack. Those are real dollars. And so I'll try to find out what the success rate is now at PTAB. Now that they've gotten up to 3 or 4 years backlog is all as opposed to 7. But it was about 50-50. That's pretty good odds, particularly if you know that you have been over-assessed and you can see it, it's clear as day. You have to, that's why we do these seminars. You have rights. You have obligations as a taxpayer to help roads and bridges and schools. Yes, we get all that. We understand the social contract that we have. But you also have a right to make appeals or to have corrections on your tax bill for an exemption that you're entitled to. They created these exemptions for a reason. We think that if you're a senior citizen and you don't have kids in school anymore and that kind of thing, that you ought to get a little bit of a break, you know, for your longevity of staying in the neighborhood and keeping the neighborhood. That's why we like people to buy homes and stay there, and raise their kids and enjoy their grandkids and, you know, come back and visit. Yes, ma'am.
My question is just what you're saying. We just bought a house in March.
Okay.
We got our tax bill, and we lost our exemptions. And we have paid the exemption, we had exemptions for years.
Okay, so you have a new home.
Well, who does?
Yeah, so you have a new home that's new to you. So now you have to start over. I mean, you have to start with that property. We know that you're still, we know that once you turn 65, you don't go backwards. I wish we did. I wish once I hit 300 pounds, I'd go back to 190, okay? But you don't do that unless you work on it. But yeah, I think, you just need to make sure you talk with your local assessor to make sure, and they won't give you a prorated unit. You bought in March, right?
We sold another house, and why wouldn't our exemptions transfer from that house to this house?
Oh, well, yeah, that's, your exemptions, I'm not saying that you don't make sense and that is logical, but the exemptions go with the property. So like when I got my grandmother's home, and she was 65, she's 80 something, and she was on a fixed income, and so she had a free, that first few months that I lived in her house, I paid the tax bill, and it was based on her exemptions that she qualified for. But then as soon as they saw that RESPA come through, that the house had changed hands, they're like, oh no, they took all the exemptions off, and now I have to apply for them to apply for that house. And I'm not 65, I'm not on fixed income, and so I lost all that. The homestead exemption is based on, did you live in the house on January 1st? That's what the law states. And you can live in Florida the rest of the year. But if you live in that house on January 1st, you're entitled to a homeowner's exemption. That's how the law is. Well, but in most places, the local assessor will prorate that for you. If you buy the house in January, somewhere after the 1st, they will prorate it, and they'll give you some kind of an exemption.
Maybe I should go back and talk to her again.
Yeah, I would go back and talk to her again, because I think that you bought in March, that's 3/4 of the year that.
Yeah, 81 days.
Yeah, so I would go back and ask, because I think.
I knew it was gonna go up because we bought it in town.
Yes.
I knew that.
Our tax rate.
Right, okay.
But
We knew that.
It was double because we had no exemptions. And she said it wouldn't be for 2 more years. And I know.
Well, because what she was saying is, remember you're paying a year behind, so in a year you get the exemptions, and then you pay that bill a year later.
It was still a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I would go back and talk with her. See. Yes, sir.
I went before the Board of Appeals
Uh-huh.
and challenged them on my taxes, why the increase was, and I was told that the state required a minimum of 5% every year.
Required a 5% increase. Increase. Okay, you went to the board of review or the property tax appeal board? Okay, so the board of review. So, PTEL, property tax extension limitation law, is intended to be a speed bump, a road bump to rising taxes. The maximum is 5% or cost of living, the CPI. That doesn't mean the taxing body can't raise their tax levy or their budget more than that. It means if they want to do that, they've got to go to you, the taxpayers. We need a new football field in high school. I serve on a high school board, so I heard everything. We got to have the money. We got to have this new football field where we can do it. It's, Paxton and Pontiac and, wherever. Okay, well, make your case and let's vote on it.
How do you push back on that? I mean, when you go to a school board meeting, for example, how do you stop?
I don't know. I serve on the board of 7 members, 6 of them and me. I couldn't get a second on the motion. I wanted to fix Big Bertha, which is the nickname for our big hot water system in the high school. I couldn't get a second because it didn't fit into the budget ideas of the superintendent and the other board members who wanted to overspend more money. Which is why I got into the school board to begin with, because all my neighbor ladies were single or widowed on fixed incomes, and I don't need to get political, but I'm a Republican, and they were all Democrats. I'm like, Mark, you're the only one that cares about property taxes. You gotta run. I said, I'll never win. I'm running against an incumbent woman who was a teacher at the high school for 20 years. Guess what? I beat her by 8 points. It was a runaway. They were so mad. But there I was.
They're not under veto here, they can raise the tax,
Okay,
whatever percent.
I see. Okay.
Whatever, whatever the township assessor says they want to raise it to cover, they can raise it, right? Or is there a limit to that? That's the question.
Yeah, I think that at 5% of CPI, unless you go to the low. Okay.
But then when they want to, if they want to raise it more than that, they just call for a meeting and everybody says aye at the school board to whatever amount they want. Is that?
When I go to church,
That's what I understand.
and I go to the grocery store, I gotta see my neighbors. Are you kidding me? I got people saying to me, that my neighbors are like, thank you, Mark. Thank you for standing up for us. I know you lost, I know you couldn't get a second, but at least you're fighting for our kids. And they're like, oh, you're just that right-wing Republican who hates kids, hates teachers. I was a teacher, I was in the classroom. I love kids. Are you kidding me? I ran because at some point you can't spend money you don't have. You know, okay, I got on the soapbox, I'm really sorry. But this is.
Am I correct in that? About the school board, they have a meeting then?
Yeah, and you need to show up.
raise it whatever amount they
Well, you need to show up, and you need to make, you know your school board members, you know your members, right? You need to call them, and you need to say to them, look, we love children, we love the football team, we want books, we want computer, we love all that stuff, but you can't spend money you don't have. My neighbor ladies they were buying their meds. They couldn't afford to pay their tax bill and buy their medicines.
You don't have the power to stop it.
You do. If all of you went to a library board meeting, or went to a school board meeting, or whatever meeting or you think you need to go to because this thing is just a little bit off, you would have an impact. If I saw all of you come in here and you're like, the pitchforks, and you're like, you know, because it's not, we don't hate children, we don't hate teachers, it's that we can't afford to spend money we don't have. I made that argument for 2 years, I served, and then I didn't run it.
But is there statute that limits, there's statute that limits the school board as how much they actually can raise?
Yeah.
Ask for, right?
We were told they raised it 32%.
I don't think you can do that.
I don't think that's possible.
I don't know what the statute is with that, but I mean, there's limitations as to what the school board can increase their property.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go overboard with time, but I appreciate the questions. I appreciate your attention. You're a great group, and I'm sorry.
That's a question.
I'm sorry.
Everybody in this room is here because we want to reduce our property taxes.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the way I understand this, the only way we're ever going to reduce our property taxes is based upon market value of our properties. Assessed value, a third of that, times the equalization factor. Okay. So we reduce our county spending needs. County board no longer has to ask for as much money to cover all these expenses, including school consolidation, which I firmly believe in this county. Because we got 4 districts, and we got administrations serving 4 districts in this little county. Anyway, we reduce that overall value, is the state going to come through and have an equalization number, going to put it right back up a little bit. Question? Sure.
It's within the realm of possibility. I wish I could kill myself. My mother says, thank God you weren't a twin. But it could. But your voice, look, I ran for a school board because my neighbors told me I needed to. I got elected when I thought I would never get elected. I served 2 years beating my head against the wall. But what happened in the next election? 3 more people who felt like me ran. And when I didn't run, they were all mad at me because they said, well, we thought you were going to run for election. We would have 4. We would have a majority. I said, nobody ever approached me. This wasn't a cabal. I had no idea. I was just a regular guy running to serve my community and the seniors who lived in my neighborhood. That's why I ran. But then 2 years after that, 6 people, it was 6 versus 1. There were 6 like me on that board. And that school has turned around. It took time, but if you care, and we all care, hate children. We don't hate teachers. But it's just ridiculous. We just are trying to be realistic about how much money we have to spend. And so I need to wrap it up, but I'll be here. Yes.
I don't know if I would agree with you. You need to check that out. When you look at the guys that left out of here. Because the multiplier, you're talking about a multiplier, right? That the state can add on to it?
To equalize the assessments.
Yeah, so that's based on the fact that houses are selling disproportionately, right? They're not.
It could be.
Based on the assessed value of 100,000, they're selling for 150.
Yeah.
When they see that they're selling for more than what they're assessed at, then they'll add that 1.02 or 1.05.
Yeah.
But that won't, if they consolidate, it's not going to affect.
Oh, I see.
They're
Yeah.
not going to increase, so he's got wrong information.
Yeah, okay.
The state's not going to come back and increase his taxes based on that. It's only based on the fact that
Right.
it's sold.
Okay.
They're selling for more than what your assessed is, got assessed at, like he was talking here.
Okay.
Some are selling for 3 and assessed at 2.
Yeah.
And then when they sell it through your sheet, are they raising it to that 300,000 mark?
You're right. You're right.
They don't do that.
Yes.
No. Well, the answer is no, if they don't do that, that's when the multipliers comes from.
Right. You're right. You're right.
And so, but for him, consolidation, he's absolutely right. I'm for consolidating, 4 schools into the same district. I prefer that all the way up and down the state.
Yeah. We have
That's going to save on your property taxes.
the biggest that issue in the county I live in Marion County, which is about an hour and a half. Our county has that same consolidation issue. The biggest issue is what's the mascot? Really? Are we going to do the Eagles? Are we the Indians or the Eagles or the whatever? So I'll be at the back of the room if you have other questions. I'm happy to try and answer them. If I don't know the answer, then I'll look it up for you. I give this back to you. Thank you.
Mark, thank you very much. Great information at this time. I'd like to bring up State Representative Reggie Phelps.
Well, I know everybody's tired, so here's the deal. I was going to knock it, I was going to talk a little bit about the budget and, about these property taxes and consolidating the school systems is really high. First of all, this year, one of the things that we were trying to do, and this is one of the governor's plans really, is to K through 12 education. We increased K through 12 education funding by $1 billion, which was, in Robinson, Illinois, you guys got another $106,000, which is $72.76 per pupil. But every district in the state was held harmless, and a lot of districts received more money. So this is the first year the state of Illinois, K through 12, has been funded at the foundation level, $61.19 per student. The interesting thing about Robinson is most school districts receive 61 to 66% of their income from property taxes. Of course, in Robinson, the school district receives about 45% of their property taxes from, funding for the school from property taxes. So your assessed values here or your property taxes are you have enough here to offset some of the funding that the state of Illinois would be giving to you from the general revenue fund. Now, somebody was talking about the city of Chicago. They have successfully lowered to shift the cost to downstate. And now Chicago is wanting to shift even more of the cost of education to downstate. You're hearing about the idea that currently Chicago, City of Chicago, and they're outlining counter colleges there. They pay their own pensions for their teachers. They want to shift that now to the state to pay, which means that's going to shift to downstate. So if you're not voting R right now, you want to make sure you continue to vote R, because we're fighting that tooth and nail to keep that up in Chicago. Over the past, and I've got the statistics here to show you, over the past 10 years, they've steadily dropped the their percentage of what they pay for their property taxes also in the city of Chicago. So then that means more funding is sent to them through for their education through other grants like the equity grant, the poverty grants, and they get a huge proportion of those, which lifts them up incredibly higher than what we get for our. So this is one of the issues that we need to be fighting. You can see the picture there of the obey. So that's what I think there. But here's the deal: we just passed the end of June the stopgap budget. I'll give you just a quick background, and then I'm going to stick around if you want to talk about it. Only $7.7 billion of that comes from the General Revenue Fund. It's just a 6-month budget. It takes us through December of this year. So if we go back into session, well, we'll be in the veto session in November. And, but we go back in the general session in January 15th of 2017. Here's the deal. If we don't make cuts in 2017, January 2017, we are definitely going to have a huge tax increase next year. We're spending $8 billion now. By the end of the year, we're $10 billion over our general revenue funds of $32.5 billion. So that's where we're at. So close to $40 billion. We're doing the same thing for 2017 if we don't start making some cuts. That's just the long and the short of it. And so we fought it all along. We got K through 12 education. We increased that from the General Revenue Fund, $524 million for K through 12. Still doesn't seem like enough. It's just swallowing up. If we don't have some fundamental changes in Illinois, there's not going to be enough tax revenue to cover what they want to do with it. So, let me kind of finish up here real quick. So, $7.7 billion, we pledged $25 billion towards the 2016 budget, $50 billion towards the 17 budget. Like I said, 7.7 was out of the general revenue fund. We put 700. Who would have got this passed without this? We had to have $701 million for commitment to human services fund, which by all rights we needed to commit to the human services funds. Those, you have those issues here in, feeding milk to the seniors, programs for seniors, programs to those less fortunate. So that's $701 million. And technically that's called out of the Human Services Fund, but that's coming out of the General Revenue Fund. That's coming out of the taxes. You call it whatever fund you want, that's where it comes from. Then one fund that I think, you guys might, which was good for you guys, we did get $454 million for the prison systems. So, that was appropriated, this particular stopgap budget. Otherwise, right now, you can see what would be happening out here, right? They didn't have the money for the food, didn't have the money for the power, so on and so forth. So we appropriated $500 million for corrections through the end of the year. So we only got, what, 4 more months? And she's done. So if we're not back in session, and Madigan has pledged to fight bringing in another budget in the next year. He wants to continue what we just did for the next 2 years. So, and the governor's pledged to try to put a budget together that's somewhat balanced. He's agreed to increase taxes. There's no way around this. We're going to have increased taxes. You can't spend $8 billion and up to $10 billion without having some more revenue. The question is, where are you going to get the revenue? Madigan's going to fight on service taxes. Governor wants some service taxes. You're going to have sales tax, which to me is a fairer tax, but you're still going to have to push back on sales tax, and you sure as heck are going to have to push back on corporate tax and income tax for personal. Okay? So I'm willing to say we're going to have new revenue, but
What we're simply asking for is a turnaround agenda to that, tied to some economic reforms, simple ones, that would drive more business, drive more people, and stop the outflow or out-migration of people and businesses out of the state of Illinois. Madigan has put up a strong voice. He's not going to allow any of that. So it's going to be a very difficult 2017, but the increased tax is coming. I would venture to say we're going to be somewhere between 4.85 and 5.5% for our income, personal income taxes. We're going to drive ourselves all the way to the bottom again, trying to fight. You'll know more about it come November 9th. If the Republicans win 2 seats, I know this is not supposed to be partisan, but I'm partisan, folks, because here's the deal. If we don't gain some seats and put a stop against what they're outlandish spending without any representation, transparency, my ass. There is no transparency, pardon my French. You know, and it's supposed to be, but the transparency is not there. You know, he brings out a budget, $7 billion over budget, 500 pages long, right? And his people hadn't even seen it. So it's full 100% control by one person. If we don't break this back, if we can't get term limits, we're not going to get fair mapping. You saw that got kicked out, right? The courts pushed that out. Madigan pushed his people in, they pushed that out. Even though we had how many hundreds of thousands of signatures, and we didn't get it. So fair mapping's out. So the only thing we're fighting now for, the governor's going up and down the state, is for term limits. Term limits, we're one of the last states that have it set up where you elect the Speaker of the House, and all he needs is 60 votes, and he's got 71 right now. So he's been the Speaker for 32 years, folks. He is in full authority of what comes to the floor. Not the governor, not me, no Republican. You know, governor got 2 million votes. This guy gets 20,000 votes. He's the one that declares what bills come to the floor and what we vote on. Period. It's the way it is. We're one of the few states that do that. You know, it used to be you could vote on the bills that come to the floor. That was more democratically. That's all been shut down. So we're trying to get to the point where if he wants to be Speaker, he still doesn't control the bills that come to the floor. He controls them. So that's how topsy-turvy the state of Illinois is. And that's what we're fighting against. So, you know, anything you want to know about the stopgap budget, we funded higher education all the way through December of 2016. Come January 2017, we're right back to the gridiron again, fighting all this. So it's a tough battle. And, you know, taxes are coming. The question is, who's going to, with those tax increases, what are they going to be tied to? Remember in 2011, they did the same thing, $34 billion into the pension fund, and the pension fund grew. See, the big elephant in the room is, what are the actuaries on our pension? You know, I just read something from the governor's office saying that we're supposed to be making 7.5% to 8%. That's what they predict when they predict the funding for the pensions, and we're earning less than that. So the pensions, are they at $120 billion unfunded? Are they 150? We haven't got actual numbers yet to determine exactly how far behind we are in funding our pensions. It's pretty scary to me. I'm not trying to be pessimistic, you know. I'd like to give you some optimistic points of view here, but at this particular moment, the optimism is we better gain 2 seats as Republicans. 2. If we get 2, then we start to change the overall format of the House Republicans. He doesn't have supermajority. Then the governor has some control, and that's what we're fighting for. You got to get behind any of those Republicans you see out there racing to win a seat. That gives us, instead of the wheels are, you know, balance like this, we would somewhat get a little closer. And that's what we need to say so in the House of Representatives. So some of the bills that we want to pass, which would give property tax relief, because see, I'm going to vote, or I have a resolution, I've already submitted it for property tax freezes. I'm for that. Then, when you get to townships and you get to school districts and you get to the municipalities, they hate property tax freezes. But my property tax freeze would be balanced with a couple of 3 things, which would give them procurement reform, which gives them some other reforms, which would give them reforms on the way they, which would, for example, right now, if you want to submit for something, you have to use prevailing wage rates. I want to zone that out so that municipalities and school districts do not have to do that for the next 4 years. Just some relief. That relief in itself would give you offset. And that's the governor's proposal. The question is, you know, that's going to be a difficult one to pass. So I countered that and said, how about, I think I told you, $500,000 and less. It's not going to be near as much relief to you, but it's quite a bit of relief for municipalities that do a lot of odd jobs and stuff. And it will bring the jobs back locally. So a couple of other things I thought about doing is, you know, the $10 billion that we're out of balance now on spending. Do you know we're paying 1% per month interest on that? I had a meeting with a dentist just before I came here, and she said, you know, you owe me $119,000. It's 12 months. She has to, anybody that works for the state of Illinois, they go to her for dental work, okay? And she hasn't been paid for 12 months. Now, she's also charging $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 in interest on that. Okay? And it's just accumulating. She's charging 10% interest. State says you can charge 12%. Our legislative leaders got way back when and said if the state doesn't pay on time, they need to pay 1% fee. We're paying $1 billion in interest right now on late payments. So it's crazy. You know, you see the. Are you the one that left just a minute ago? Did they tell you that? I don't know that. We do need to consolidate. It will lower your cost because 4 administrators to 1 administrator is going to be a savings.
My impression of that overall statement was, my statement was, if we lower the county tax requirements, the only way it's going to go back up to impact our property taxes go back up is, for instance, if the school board says, hey, I need to have a 30% increase in my revenue or my spending amount, and they approach county board, it's their problem. I hate to say amount. That's the only way I would see that.
But you know,
My question about what your statements you're making right now, though, is, you know, even if we were to be paying off our debt as a state, paying off our debt now, how long is it going to take us to do it? If we could eliminate this $10 million overspending, how long would it take us to catch up with what we owe? And that's the first question. The second question is, we saw a property state tax increase, I don't know how many years ago it was. It's still there. Okay, you got to be second.
That happened in 2015.
On that. I'm amazed that happened. But we did that.
It didn't happen.
We did that to catch up with our.
It did, but they continued to spend at that rate.
Right, with the balance of budget, but all it did was give more money out there for them to spend more and increase the programs. I don't believe in all these social programs. And we got to cut back somewhere. And that means you pull your belt tighter on your pants and you go on. I mean, it's just.
Thank you. That's exactly what we've been saying. You need to watch.
I agree with the governor. I'm fully behind the governor. Mannequins and all that Cook County machine. If I can figure out a way to the rest of the state to take better control of what happens in the state, Cook County, we'd all be better.
The only good thing that I can say right now is those Cook County suburbs all out there got tax increases, property tax increases of 25 to 35%. You talk about a bull in a china shop. Those people are mad. The question is, are they mad enough to vote out some of the Democrats that control? See, 75% of the legislators are from that area. And it's a small area. The rest of us downstate, and most of us are Republicans. Now, there are some Democratic still areas, you know, in downstate that we need to change to ours too. But we need 2 or 3 more seats. We need more than that, but, you know, that's exactly the same thing we're fighting against. You know, it's not a question of, you know, Republican or Democrat. It's a question of common sense now. We can't spend $40 billion, take in $32 billion. So now we're going to have to increase the taxes on the few that are left over. So your taxes are going to go up. It's going to have to be a 4-year plan. Sunset again in 4 years, but this time it's actually tied to something that pays those off. My thoughts on this, I had 2 or 3 thoughts. First of all, the pension is the biggest issue. We've got to get, we have to have the state of Illinois change the Constitution to allow our legislature, and we have to do it, to allow us to change the pensions. Now, the tier 1 people that are already retired or within so many years retirement, we have to be very careful about touching those. But anything new, we could have been adjusting right now to lower our pension obligation right now. So, you know, without that pension obligation and changing that pension obligation, we're spinning our wheels.
But in reality, that's not gonna happen. I mean, that's just like me saying, me on my property taxes, I'm paying less than the guy over here at the same house. It's paying more. Am I gonna call the county and tell them that?
Trying to happen.
State legislators, they cut their own throats on the pension.
No, not state legislators. I'm talking about the rest of the pensions of the public unions, all the Illinois public unions. And, you know, your school teachers' pensions too. We're going to, in first part of the year, we will, because we've tied it to Chicago's getting $250 million. The state would owe Chicago Public Schools $250 million if they allow us to change the pensions. That makes sense? If they don't get the $250 million. We passed that in June. So we have a small chance of changing the pensions. And if we do, then we can, you know, save ourselves some money. 7.6, you know, what are we spending? $1.6 billion a year paying on the pension debt that we borrowed under Blagojevich, Quinn, so on and so forth. That's still in the budget. You know, we borrowed $30 billion at, you know, 8% interest. It's ridiculous what we do in the state of Illinois.
Where they borrow that money from?
They, you know, they just don't pay the pension. What they also did, not only did they not pay the pension, they borrowed the money in a bond and took the money and spent it on the other programs, which benefited certain Democratic districts for getting reelected. That's the system. This is the best thing you got going is you got a Republican governor that's very transparent about the bull stuff that's been done in the past, and he said, no more under my watch. Then the other thing that it's done is 47 Republicans, and there's about 6 of us that are true conservatives. But because of the governor coming into our Republican caucus, say you're the 47 Republicans, he said, if any one of you guys vote against my plans, I'll figure out a way to get you out of office. Guess what happened these last 2 years? They all voted with the governor. And he had $40 million to back up his claim. So that it straightened out some of the Republicans, because what they were doing was it's just like if you read Newt Gingrich's book about it, you know, the soft Republican in our federal government too. They went along to get along, to stay in. It was all about staying in. It isn't about what they do and what's right. And then we aren't on top of what they're voting for. You have to know what they're voting for and hold their feet to the fire. And if you don't, let them know.
Everybody in Springfield is up for whatever party they're in. See, that's the problem with politics.
Yeah, I'd say you're exactly right. They're on the Democratic side, they certainly are. On our side, we're trying to, you could say it that way. The problem is, I like everything the governor's saying.
Okay, that's a better way to put it.
If he doesn't say what I think is right, and we get watches when we come up with those bills as governors against it. If you'll look at my sheets, I voted. I didn't vote with the governor on several social issues, not economic issues, not our budget issues. I voted with the governor 100% of the time. Yes.
I have a question. You were talking about property freezing, like freezing the taxes and stuff. And I know that's one thing that a lot of the legislators are talking about. How would that actually work? I guess my question is, if that does go through and we freeze all the taxes, then all the people that turn 65 and get an exemption, do those of us that aren't 65 have to pay that? So then therefore when our taxes go up?
Well, at 65, what is the exemption anyway? Right now you get you don't get your property taxes, it just freezes your property taxes at 65. You don't get an exemption.
Yeah, there are two different ones.
What's this, well,
You get an exemption at 65,
it's like $3,000 on it.
and then if you make under 55,000 a year, you could qualify for a freeze,
Yeah.
senior freeze.
Yeah.
So they're two separate items.
It shouldn't make that big of a difference.
Either that one or the returning veteran or somebody like that came home or, you know, things like that. If new people get exemptions, then.
Well, they have to
where do they
be,
make up that amount?
yeah, on the veterans, it's based on 70% disability. It's 100%, 70%, and 50%
Yeah, the
disability.
disability is based on the federal designation of your disability. It has to be on your DD2s or whatever they perform.
Right, but I'm asking who's gonna make up for that money that is.
Everybody
that
else.
We lost every year from all these new people signing up for the exemption.
Yeah, the property tax.
If all of our taxes are frozen.
Yeah.
And we don't have any increases coming, then all those new people, you know, say 10 of these people in this room turn 65 next year. If you're saying our taxes are frozen, then who's gonna make up that extra money that they're not gonna pay?
It's like I said, you have the property tax freeze, you have to tie the property tax freeze for relief. You have to give the municipalities, the townships, the counties relief. So right now, I want to take no more unfunded mandates. As a matter of fact, I want to rescind all unfunded mandates back to 2011.
So in each of those municipalities and each of those taxing districts, will they just lose out on that much money from those new people signing up for the exemptions?
No, the
So we
municipal,
would have to make up for the.
no, when we tie it to the,
That's one of the issues I haven't quite understood how that.
well, see, every municipality, every school district pays workers' compensation. The first thing we're trying to do, and I think we will get that passed, is maybe at least a 15 up to a 25, possibly a 30% reduction in workers' compensation, which I can't remember. It's a 400 million, it's $500 million in savings, just in the state universities. I don't know exactly what the figure is for municipalities, but every municipality would save X amount of dollars from that. Then there's, does that make sense to you? There's like 4 other things we were going to do. We'll tie it to it. Yeah.
It actually doesn't freeze your taxes. Your taxes will go up still based on your assessed valuation. It limits the increase of the levies that be implemented that creates your rate. Is what it does.
So they're freezing the tax rates, not the actual.
Freezing is a bad term. It limits.
That's why I'm wanting clarification.
It does not freeze anything. It's property tax liability limitation law. Okay?
So I'm
it limits
not talking
the
about
way you.
detail. I'm talking, there's,
The same thing.
there's talk of legislation going out there that all property taxes are gonna be frozen.
That's what we refers to detail. That's what we refer to. It's actually just a levy. It's not frozen. The value will never be frozen. The levy becomes limited for how much it increases.
Right, but we already have that.
I tell you what, I've got some more information on that after we close here. If you see me, I'll give you a copy of it. It talks about the property tax freeze I did. If there's nothing else,
I got a vote.
yeah.
Everybody keeps talking about, this is the elephant that's been knocking on the door, okay? All we have to do is look across the river and see what happened with the property tax freezes. Explain to me how that's not gonna happen here when we end up running millions of dollars shy around the state for our basic services. What do we do now? What do we do now if we lose that income?
Well, that's why I say it's going to have to be tied to some reforms. Whatever the offsetting of that tax is going to be tied to reforms. You do your reforms, now instead of collecting $18 billion in income taxes, because now, first of all, we stopped the outflow migration of businesses. We're losing 56 manufacturing jobs a day in the state of Illinois, whereas the state of Indiana gains 150,000 manufacturing jobs. If we, in the same period that the United States, from 2008 to 2016, if we'd have grown at the same rate at the federal level, we'd had 600,000 new jobs in the state of Illinois. Instead, not 600,000 jobs, We've lost jobs. So if you add 600,000 new jobs, it's billions of dollars in new revenue.
Excuse me, we have all respect.
So that's good.
Matter have to look at people. Yeah. Well, somebody's trying to fuck me. Okay? Go ahead, sir.
So anyway, that's basically what it amounts to. With the economic reforms, you'll get the offset in income.
I understand that, but that takes time. Well, if we limit our taxes, our property taxes now, it's gonna take years before we pick up the jobs that we need in Illinois. And what are the local government's gonna do? What's county government's going to do when we've been limited to our, on our income?
Well, I think, the three things we tied that to were procurement, workers' compensation, and the third one, which is the right to work zones. We've already figured out with those three, it offsets your property tax freeze.
Okay.
So, and more than offsets it actually, just with those three. So if we get the other economic reforms, now with those three we offset, now we start gaining more business. Now we start gaining more taxes. That's the key to the state of Illinois. You're not gonna be able to tax your way out of this. You can't freeze your way out of this. Right now we need to grow our way out of this. And it's gonna take a combination of a couple things. 2017 is really gonna be important to us. If we do not stop spending at that $40 billion rate, if we don't come up with some compromise here in 2017, it's gonna be difficult in the next few years. So I'm done, yeah.
When the governor was running, he said he was going to cut government by 30%, like Mitch Daniels did in Indiana. Has he made any cuts? As far as, we got big government. You look around and everybody works. Everybody works with the government.
I don't know the answer to that.
Because that's why.
But we can get you that answer. I don't know what the payroll looks like right now as far as the state of Illinois, but I can get you that answer. Thanks for that question.
Thank you guys for coming in, and if you want to have any further questions, we'll take them down, and we'll try and get back in touch with you. Thank you guys so much for coming.
All right, Alex.